You know that feeling? You wake up one morning, your life is perfectly fine on paper, but suddenly, you are just hit with this overwhelming sense of total dissatisfaction. You look around and think, I'm doing this all wrong. I'm in the wrong place. I'm with the wrong people. Well, welcome to our explainer of the fascinating source text, Age Crisis of Growth. Because as we're going to see, this sudden painful feeling, it's not a sign that you're failing at life. It's actually a genetically scheduled biological upgrade.
Okay, let's dive into this. We're going to move fast today, starting by diagnosing exactly why everything gets under our skin. Then we'll look at the fundamental difference between crab and snail people, map out the literal anatomy and timeline of an age crisis, track our lifelong search for meaning, see how this biological chaos messes with our love lives, and finally, lay out exactly how to survive the whole shebang. So, first things first. Why, even in perfect, completely ideal conditions, do we suddenly get just so intensely irritated with absolutely everything?
The answer is cognitive dissonance. Our brains are biologically wired to be whole. Nature designed our minds to absolutely despise internal contradictions. So when one belief contradicts another, we don't just subtly tweak one single point of view. That's actually too difficult for the brain. Instead, it prefers a complete, wholesale change of your entire worldview. It essentially triggers a crisis as this incredibly efficient, purposeful mechanism to just reboot your reality all at once, bumping you up to the next developmental level.
Now, according to the author, humanity basically splits into two completely distinct genetic camps based on how we handle these massive worldview upgrades.
We have the crabs and the snails. It's a brilliant metaphor, really. Crabs are your idealists. They live for these grand ideas, always trying to change the world for the better. But when reality hits and those ideals shatter, they violently discard their old worldview. They completely shed their old shells, just like an actual crab. Snails, on the other hand, are the pragmatists. They aren't driven by idealism. They focus on tangible, fundamental things like money and power. So snails don't shed their shells. They just pragmatically add new layers to their existing reality.
And just to be totally clear, this entire analysis is basically a survival guide for the idealist crabs. Why? Because they're the ones who suffer the absolute most during these turning points. For a crab, these upgrades feel like violent, deeply painful revolutions, and they desperately need this information to make it through. Whereas snails, well, they generally just don't bother themselves with these kinds of existential struggles.
Let's move on and see how this builds, because there is an actual physical anatomy to an age crisis. It's a literal countdown.
This isn't just random angst, it's a highly precise biological clock that is fascinatingly anchored right to your birthday. Here's how it plays out. About 6 months before your birthday, a profound disappointment sets in. You feel like everything is just wrong and you're desperately searching for a change. Then, roughly 20 days before the big day, you hit rock-bottom exhaustion. You are so tired of being disappointed that you just stop caring entirely. Your internal processor starts quietly recycling all those failed viewpoints. And then finally, about 20 days after your birthday, boom, the rebirth happens. Your psyche is wiped clean, ready to accept a brand new reality.
I should definitely add, this period is notoriously brutal. While your brain is doing this massive reboot, it takes a serious toll on the body. This transition is very often accompanied by severe stress and literal physical sickness. It's a complete systemic overhaul.
Which brings us to the author's concept of the lifelong sine wave of searching.
Think of your life as constantly alternating between two massive phases. Let's call them the plus years and the minus years. The plus years are all about seeking. This is when you're trying to grasp the truth, figuring out the meaning of life and how the world actually works. But then you shift into the minus years. This is the implementation phase. This is when you step out into the world to actually execute and act on all those big ideas and meanings you accumulated during your plus years.
So the crucial point is what happens when you cross from one phase to the other. These transitions trigger two very different but highly dangerous types of crises. Moving from a plus phase to a minus phase can lead to severe, crushing depression if you haven't actually found a meaning to implement. You basically feel your life has zero purpose. But conversely, moving from minus to plus triggers what the author calls the agony of activity, where you become dangerously convinced of your own righteousness.
The source text imparts some pretty intense historical examples of the fatal reality of that plus to minus transition. Figures like the poet Sergei Yesenin at age 30, Vladimir Mayakovsky at 37, and singer Vladimir Vysotsky at 42. When an idealist crab enters the implementation phase without a core meaning to anchor them, the results can literally be fatal.
But then there's the flip side. The author points to the Jesus crisis around age 33 as the ultimate minus to plus transition. From a purely psychological standpoint, this represents that agony of activity. This is when a person becomes so aggressively certain of their new exclusive truth that they develop a literal messiah complex, pitying everyone who disagrees with them and willing to actually die for their newfound meaning.
Now let's shift gears for a second. How does this biological upgrade affect our romantic relationships? The illusion of perfect love.
You'd be surprised how often people fall head over heels right in the middle of a massive crisis. But again, look at the difference between our two types. Crabs, our chaotic idealists, they don't fall for a real person. They fall for an idealized projection. They project their new reality onto a partner, creating this incredibly passionate but notoriously short-lived romance. Because, well, eventually, they realize the other person isn't a flawless god. Snails, on the other hand, they take a deeply unromantic, calculated approach. They avoid that chaotic passion entirely, pragmatically choosing identical partners based on shared ethics, building solid but pretty emotionless unions.
All right, we are nearing the end, which brings us to the most important question. How do we actually survive this upgrade?
And this brilliantly illustrates our highly actionable survival tactics to keep you from self-destructing. Step 1. Recognize that this agonizing state is temporary, and crucially, it is entirely internal. It's a biological process. The world isn't actually ending. Step 2. Whatever you do, do not make irreversible, rash decisions while your brain is in the middle of a reboot. Just hold tight. Step 3. Shift your focus entirely inward. Use this massive surge of chaotic energy to upgrade yourself. Try to emerge on the other side smarter, stronger, and far more resilient.
But here's a pretty heavy warning from the author. If you're going through this right now, and you've already found external villains to blame for your pain, like it's your boss's fault, or your partner's fault, or society's fault, you're probably going to reject this entire analysis as total fiction. But for those of you currently suffering who can't find peace, understanding that this is a predictable internal roadmap, well, that can offer immense comfort.
Which leads us to a final thought. The biology of our minds forces us to evolve, whether we are ready for it or not. So I want to leave you with this. Look at your own life, your own recent frustrations, and completely honest reality. And ask yourself, where exactly are you on this graph right now?